Good evening and welcome, valued podcast listener. If you're hearing this, I regret to inform you that I am dead. I died doing something that I would like you to picture being awesome. Thank you for your understanding. Please dig for instructions regarding my stuff. Just kidding. If you're hearing this, it means that I need you to head to the police station and bring the bail money. But first, have a little hard drive bonfire, if you know what I mean. If you're hearing this, it means that I've moved to a new location recently and haven't had access to the internet for a few days. So, you're about to hear an old podcast that I recorded a while ago. Don't forget to send us an email at darkroastcultpodcast@gmail.com. Send us in your spooky stories or creepy ideas, and maybe you'll get a little credit for writing in. As gracious host of the podcast, I'd like to thank you, the listener. Don't let it go to your head. Anyway, here's the podcast. Well, welcome back to the podcast, everybody. The only podcast that could take a 4 to 5 month long hiatus after only recording 2 episodes. Huh? The nerve of this podcast. Who does this podcast think it is? This podcast has got some gull going on a luxurious 4-month long vacation after only doing such little amount of work. That's right, I went on a little vacation known as getting throttled at work. Lovely little place, I recommend you go there sometime, take a little vacation, bring the family, the kids are gonna love getting throttled at work. God dang, just really not enough time in the day to do anything. But now with this turn of events, I find myself with too much time, really. I got enough time to sort of sit down and do some research and write a podcast and put it together. So I have at least enough time, I guess. So it has been a while. You might be noticing a couple changes, more or less. We did a little bit of a rebranding, and I'll get to that a little bit later into the podcast, as well as what I've been up to while I haven't been here telling you about spooky stuff. A little bit later in the podcast. So I just wanted to give a little shout out to, hey, all my listeners out there in Coronaville. How are you doing? I hope you're keeping it safe, keeping it healthy, keeping it secure, and most importantly, keeping it quarantined. The government has issued a stay inside for the love of God alert, so we are all on lockdown, I think. I've not been following the news that closely, but mainly because I don't follow news that much. I've always felt like the news was a very boring adult thing for adults to enjoy, so I guess at this point, if I don't enjoy news, I'm never gonna be an adult, because I hit 30. I hit 30 years old while I was on podcast hiatus, in podcast hiatusville. Not living it up, by the way, not living it up, but I'm back here. A couple months older, a couple months wiser, in the middle of a pandemic, so why not podcast? That seems to be the way to go. Keeping everybody updated on the most important parts of my life, which are the 4 walls that are around me, I guess, because that's all that I get to look at. Quarantine's a weird thing. Not being sick, going down the street, seeing nothing, nobody, not a thing. Going to Walmart and having people stand a respectful distance away from you and not want to talk to you. I could get used to this. This is a quarantine I could get used to. I'm kind of all about it, but the sickness part sucks. That's the downside to this, I guess. Well, I figure because I'm recording a podcast, I might as well take advantage of the current state of affairs. It's not something I'd normally do. I'm not really a topical guy, but the time is right. And it's not like I'm one of those hipster guys who's like, oh, being topical. Oh, you're just gonna mention something because it's the topical thing to do, and It's good. It's gonna be relatable at the time. At the time where it's a topic. I've got my hands on my hips because I feel like people who talk like that put their hands on their hips a lot. So I'm not selling out. This is something that has been on my list to make a podcast about for a long time, and I figure now's the time for your consideration: the history of the Black Plague. So before we get into this, I just want everybody to know that my cat Goober, the blind one, she's sitting facing the wall, maybe like 2 inches away from it, just staring directly at one spot. And like, I'm not saying that it's freaking me out, but it is weirding me out, which I got are two different things. I swear. You look up the definition of being weirded out and being creeped out, and or freaked out even. They're all different. They're all different things. What are you doing? There's nothing there. There's no such thing as spooky spooks that are gonna get me in the night. And there's nothing in that closet. You know what? Actually, the cat food is in that closet. Now that mystery is taken care of. The Black Plague, or bubonic plague, or Black Death, swept through Europe and Asia in the mid-1300s. The first recorded encounter with the Black Plague was October 1347, when ships came in from the Black Sea and docked at a Sicilian port. When they met the boats at the dock, most of the sailors were already dead, but the ones that weren't were covered in black boils that were oozing pus and blood. Before the death ships could be ordered out of the harbor, the plague had already departed from the boats for a 5-year tour of Europe, visiting and killing over 20 million people, which is 1/3 of the population. It took Europe 200 years to recover their population numbers. Florence only recovered in the 19th century, which I'm not sure how long ago that was, but I wrote recently recovered in the 19th century, but I feel like that ain't that recent. Florence, get at me with your facts, let me know. Black Death was so communicable, however that word's pronounced. You could catch it from someone just by brushing up against them if they were infected, and sometimes you would be dead by morning. The plague attacked your lymphatic system, which swelled your lymph nodes and could spread to your blood and lungs if left untreated. Symptoms included boils, swelling of the groin, neck, and armpits, and oozing blood and pus. I'm gonna guess that goes along with the boils. You can't have boils without oozing blood and pus. Remember that. For the deposition. Gangrene of the fingers from the plague, killing the flesh and skin, was also something that happened. So you could enjoy those little black finger nubs picking away at your oozy skin. Can we all just have a sip of water and go ahead, refresh yourself. Just cleanse your palate of that sensation. A lot of people fled the cities to go to the country in order to try and escape the disease, but not even those people were safe. Due to poor hygiene practices in the 1300s, most of the streets were normally filthy and roaming with animals. You see, what they didn't know was the Black Death was passed by fleas. Fleas would bite infected rats, which were pretty much everywhere, typically aboard boats and ships, and the rats would infect the fleas, and the infection would cause the fleas to become more hungry and aggressive. Once the fleas were done with the rats, they would move on to the humans and cause the plague to move that much faster. Infected rats and fleas carried it from port to port all throughout the trade routes from Paris to North Africa. It infected barnyard animals, so a lot of sheep died and caused a wool shortage. You can count yourself lucky that you didn't die of bubonic plague back then, because back then the treatments for the bubonic plague were bloodletting and boil lancing, which sound an awful lot like stabbing and stabbing, which generally ends up killing you anyway. So you could get stabbed in your wounds, or you could have a bath in vinegar. I personally despise the scent of vinegar, so I think I would take the Black Death over a vinegar bath any day. Well, it's just me. I'm just saying. No, like imagine, not only are you dying of the Black Plague, the Black Death, you've got boils all over your body, and they're oozing the stinkiest sludge, and then somebody's like, you know what? How about you take a dip? Then you're just walking around with boils all over your body, and you reek like a pickle's body odor. Ugh, Black Plague, take me now. The Black Plague went on to ravage the people for another 5 to 8 years until it finally ended when they got the idea to start quarantining the sick people and keeping them away from the healthy people. And the unaffected would stay in their homes, and then they would take the sick folk and they would take them probably to like a nice farm where they would have all the space they'd need to run and play. Oh boy, and they're so happy there. They're so happy. They've made friends. Don't worry, you get to go visit them whenever you want. Just kidding, they probably died and are in a mass grave somewhere. That's the Black Plague for you, though. About 800 years later, it returned, but was kept under control by isolating the sailors who were coming to port, who were covered in boils and dying. Then, flash forward to the year 1900, where there was another outbreak, only this time it was in San Francisco's Chinatown. The epidemic was recognized by the medical authorities in March 1900. Governor Henry Gage denied the plague was here, trying to prevent loss of reputation and revenue for San Francisco, but the people with the illnesses were isolated, and this kind of undermined the credibility of the governor, and he was asked to not be the governor no more. And overall, there were 121 cases, 119 deaths. During 1906, Chinatown was destroyed by an earthquake and a fire. I think that was like an earthquake-fire combination. One caused the other. Most likely the earthquake, then the fire. Unless there's something I don't know about geography and geology. Hit me up. Anyway, so Chinatown destroyed. And during the rebuild of 1907, the plague hit again. Only this time it was randomly throughout the city. $2 million was spent killing rats all over the city, trying to kill as many as possible to stop the disease. And in 1908, 160 more cases were identified. Then they discovered that the California ground squirrel was identified as a carrier. All them dead rats, and for what? While now we have antibiotics that can take care of stuff like this, the World Health Organization still reports 1,000 to 3,000 cases of plague every year. I don't know if that's true or not, but it's kind of scary, a little scary, just a little. Don't get bit by fleas or rats, just don't. I know what you're thinking, how big of a bummer is this? But it's not all bad news, because the one medical advancement that came out of the Black Plague was the idea of quarantine during outbreaks. Keeping sick people away from healthy people. Logic. So logic was discovered. So that was the one medical advancement that came out of it. How neat is that? As if before that, whenever there was a major illness breaking out, they were all getting together at like medieval mixers, and they'd be like, Dennis, he's just standing there, oozing into his cup like an idiot. I'm gonna go touch my face to his, let him know who's boss. Some people believe that according to, I don't know, ancient scripture or old documentation, or maybe like an old note written on an ancient loose leaf piece of paper that maybe somebody stuck to the very first corkboard with a really old thumbtack. Some people say that during times of plague, back then, like a long time ago, ancient times, before everybody got sick with the plague, before the masses were ill, there were sightings of objects in the sky creating mist, and figures who were cloaked and hooded on the ground, spraying what appeared to be some sort of mist over the crops with like a sickle-like object. And this is where the idea of a robed, cloaked messenger of death comes from, or the Grim Reaper. And that's a pretty cool little factoid to know, I guess, until you learn that I saw that on an episode of Ancient Aliens that I came across while doing some research for the podcast. Yeah, I was Googling up a storm, and I came across an episode of Ancient Aliens that was on plagues and illnesses, and wouldn't you know it, ancient aliens. Aliens who are ancient. And that was something they mentioned. It's an entertaining show. I will say that. I don't really know how you would even report on something like that back then. Like, way back then? How would you even? Yeah, you would just stick your head out a thatch roof window, I guess, and shout at somebody, and hopefully they write it down and it makes it into the Bible or onto some sort of paper that transcends time. But something I thought was interesting they mentioned, they took salmonella into space, and in zero gravity, it mutates and becomes more deadly. So make sure when you're in space, you always cook your chicken. You don't want it pink in the middle. Could that be the moral of today's podcast? Maybe the moral or the lesson learned, I guess. Just real quick, I want to give a couple shout-outs to a few other plagues that you might not have heard of, but I had to do a little research on for the podcast. It's sort of like an honorable mentions, I guess. It's just because there are so many other plagues, and I know when people say the plague, they're obviously talking about the Black Plague, but there are so many other plagues, like the Cripperian Plague of 2050 AD, guys. 2014 archaeologists find a mass burial site covered in a thick layer of lime, which I guess was something people used to use as a disinfectant way back when. They found the remains of a bunch of people who were burned in a giant bonfire, and a Latin transcript that said that they all had an illness that caused diarrhea and wounds around the mouth. In a prehistoric village in China, archaeologists found a 5,000-year-old house that was just filled with skeletons. Just skeletons and skeletons and skeletons, and they think that suggests that all of these people died from the same illness and all of their bodies were just tossed into a house and later burned down. In 430 BC, the people of Athens were suddenly afflicted with a fever, or heats of the head, which is my new favorite way to say that. They had redness and inflammation of the eyes as well as horrible breath. I guess the death toll reached the hundreds of thousands. And finally, the Justinian Plague was also, like the Black Plague, spread through infected rats on merchant ships. It took place in 541 AD and claimed up to 10,000 people per day. Bodies were tossed into piles because they just couldn't. There was just so many. People walked around and went, with these dead bodies, I just can't. And they were burned in great big piles. People experience sudden fever and swollen lymph nodes, so it's a lot like the Black Plague, I guess. And that's just a few of the other plagues that I wanted to mention, because I guess there's not enough people know about the plagues. Wash your hands, everybody. Wash your damn hands. Well, welcome back, everybody. How's it going? These are crazy times we're living in right now. The government kind of ordering us to stay indoors and stop touching each other and stop licking each other on the eyeball. I hear that's a big thing in France these days, so it must suck for them over there. I guess I just want to give a big thank you to everybody who decided to come back and give the podcast a listen, because it's been a while. It's been, I want to say, like 4 or 5 months since I've made an episode. Like, I recorded those 2 episodes and then just didn't really tell anybody. I just slinked off into the darkness, and now I'm back. Hey, well, I'll tell you why. I'll tell you what happened. All about that, what I was doing in that 4 months. A lot of it was going to work, so you can't blame my laziness totally on that. Some of it was laziness. Hey, there was some laziness. I won't discount the claims that I'm a lazy son of a bitch. You've got it. You pegged me. That's me. But I may be lazy. I'm not afraid to lick a couple eyeballs when it comes down to it, though. So we got a podcast finally back. I ditched the old microphones. I'm going with a different microphone now, and it's making it a lot easier to actually record. the podcast directly to the computer rather than onto a memory card that I have to put into another computer, and it's a whole nightmare. So this seems like an easy way to get this done. But the real thing that I've been working on for the last couple months, the reason I've not been talking to y'all, and let me tell you, 4 to 5 months is a long time for two people to go without talking, and then just to come back like nothing ain't happening. Here's what happened. I recorded the original 2 episodes of this podcast, and then I was like, it'd be really cool if I could get like a sponsor for the podcast, a little spons, a little shout out to some company, and then they give me a little cash in the hand or in the PayPal, whatever they want to do it, I don't care. But then I got thinking, like, well, wouldn't it just be a lot easier to become your own sponsor and make your own thing, and then that way you feel like you did something at the end of the fucking day? So that's what I did. So, by the way, pardon my F-bomb right there. I dropped that without warning. Sorry about that. I hope your townsfolk got the warning before it hit. But anyway, so I decided that I would make something neat that I could sell on the podcast or just shout out on the podcast every now and then. Something cool that would be a fun thing for everybody to... Whoa! I just hit a can. By the way, I'm completely surrounded in bubbly cans right now. I'm on a sparkling water kick. It's crazy. I've never drank so much water in my entire life. I'm peeing all the time. My girlfriend has actually pointed out that I pee far too much now. So that's a thing that's going on with my life. And I'm just, it would be, if this was beer cans, you'd think there might be a problem, but I'm just really hydrated, and the water's sparkling. I don't understand what the whole thing is with sparkling water right now, but I think they finally got it right. Again, this, by the way, is not the segue into telling you all about this is just, I just hit a can with my hand, and I got off topic anyway. So I decided that I would make my own thing for a sponsor, and we just do our own thing and not worry about everybody else. And I kind of thought about what would be the thing that would be really cool to do. What would be something that I actually care about, by the way, which is, that's really hard to find. It's really hard to find a thing that you care about. I find anyway. So I thought about it, and then I decided I was going to make my own coffee. We'll make a dark roast cult. Dark Roast Cult Coffee, Dark Roast Cult Podcast. It kind of worked, so I changed the name of the podcast. That's why it might be different. If you go listen to the other 2 original episodes, you might hear differently. And I thought I fixed that, but I probably didn't. Anyway, so welcome to the Dark Roast Cultcast. Let's, call it whatever you want. The DRCC, maybe? DRC PC. It's a lot of letters. But you could check out darkroastcult.com, darkroastcult.ca, and soon, very soon, the whole thing is, I was ready to pull the trigger on this coffee thing. I talked to a guy who is, he roasts coffee, and he's making me my own blend. I picked it out. It's a dark roast, of course. It would be silly if it wasn't. Funny enough, originally it wasn't. It was a light roast, and it was with some company in California, and I was kind of getting the raw end of the deal, I felt. So I'm going with shipping it out myself and everything. I'm talking to a local guy who's making me my own dark roast. I don't know if I'm gonna spill the beans on the blend. It's Sumatra and Guatemala. I won't give you any more. I don't want anybody copping my blend. It's secret herbs and spices. I've got my hand up like I'm whispering to somebody. I'm talking into a microphone. Anyway. So that's what I've been up to. I've just been making my own coffee, and I started going sort of full fingers into this sticker thing that I've been doing. I've been designing stickers, selling them on my website, shrugsquad.com, which is where you'll be able to buy the coffee as soon as this whole Corona thing blows over. That's the only thing that's kind of keeping me from doing it, because I don't know if I'm going to be able to mail coffee over the border to any of my American again, this can, I'm going to move the can, to any of my American, listeners or coffee drinkers. So I'm going to figure that out. I'm going to go talk to the people at the post office. I could have done that before I recorded this, by the way, but I figured why not record this first, and then we'll figure it out later. So you could look forward to that. It's a dark roast. It's real earthy. It's kind of dark chocolatey. It's good. It's good stuff. I'm really excited about it. I drank some this morning, and I'm pretty excited about it. Anyway, so that's, if you've been talking to me at all in like the last couple months, this is pretty much all I've had to talk about. I recently placed the order for the labels for the coffee. It should be coming in. As soon as I get the labels, I can maybe order some coffee and send it out to some people. We'll see. Anyway, that's kind of where I'm at on the whole coffee thing. And once we get that going, it'll be the Dark Roast Cult sponsor sort of shout out. And I'll give you like a discount code for people who listen to the podcast. And yeah, you could expect that to be sometime soon. I don't know. I'm not quite sure. It's the whole future right now is very not tentative, but like a little less than. It's if that makes sense. You know, it's shaky ground we're on right now. I don't know. The it feels like the whole world's crumbling a little bit, doesn't it? And I don't want to freak people out, but like I wasn't inconvenienced at all with this whole COVID thing until I went to order like sushi online, and I wanted to use Skip the Dishes. I don't know if you know what that is. It's like DoorDash or Uber Eats, I guess. I guess we tried Uber Eats too. And our favorite sushi place, the place that we really wanted to go to, the place we really wanted to eat from, they got yam rolls that'll knock your dick off. It's so good. Totally blanking on the name right now, so I can't give them this wicked shout out. But that's what I wanted, and I couldn't get it because they're closed because of the whole thing. So here I am, dick in hand, without it. I got pizza. We got pizza. I mean, pizza's fine. I like pizza, but I was like, it's kind of like I was a little annoyed. I was like, yam rolls. And like me telling you that story is the biggest pile of like sort of first world white privileged problems. But I gotta tell you, when I didn't eat a yam roll, I frowned. That's all I'm saying. Every time I'm not eating a yam roll, I'm frowning, by the way. It's very hard to find me eating a yam roll these days, if you know what I mean. So, oh. Anyway, guys, thank you for listening to the podcast. I hope you enjoyed it. I will be making another one real soon, real shortly. If you want to suggest topics for the podcast, I would say go to Instagram, follow instagram.com/darkroastcult, and message me on there something you would like the podcast to be about. I think there's an email button, and you could probably reach me through there. By the time you hear this, I'll have figured it out. Just go on to Instagram, check it out. That's where you'll find more information about the coffee too, by the way. When it finally comes to launch, I'll be hyping it up on there. Until then, I'm going to be making some content, trying to post it regularly until we figure out this whole COVID thing. So anyway, thanks for listening. Thanks for checking out the podcast. I hope you enjoy it. We'll be talking about more things, spooky, paranormal, chilling. You don't get chilly spine, you get a chilling spine. Spine chillers and spine chili, which sounds like diarrhea because it comes at the end of the spine. All right, good night, everybody. Thanks for listening, and sleep tight. Don't let anything bite, although it may want to. So there it is. That's the podcast. You may have remember hearing it once before, but I doubt it. Anyway, don't forget to follow us on Instagram, instagram.com/darkroastcult, or any other social media that you find yourself being social on. We want to get social with you. Follow us. Anywhere. Anytime. Anyway, good night.